Nick Clark, a professor at Susquehanna University, spoke on Tuesday about knowledge in voters, including about voters with low information.
Modern democratic theory that decision-making requires knowledge and wisdom. That it requires whoever's making the decision, whether it's people that we've elected to government, whether we're making it ourselves, it requires that you understand the system in which you're operating, that you have full information about things with which you're making decisions. The question that we really start with is how much do people actually know? That's probably the most fundamental question posed within this research. And what we know across time and really across space at this point is that most Americans actually know very little about politics and their government. For that matter, most citizens in other democracies know very little as well. Where something like only 28% of people can name all three branches of government, and that's in a recent Anaheim study. I'm sure many of you, those of you that are wiser in the audience, who would have watched Jay Leno, wiser because that was the early 90s, or those of you that may have been more recently watching Jimmy Kimmel, I think both of those programs feature these sorts of on-the-street interviews with people, right, who oftentimes aren't able to cite very basic facts about politics. Now, at this point, you know, of course, the answer or the next point would be, well, that's bad, but I don't actually buy into that narrative. And there's a political theorist, a political economist named Anthony Downs that provides us an explanation for why this is the case. And the explanation isn't that people are just dumb, right? In fact, it's very much the opposite of that. Downs theorizes that it's actually not rational to know about politics. He argues that the marginal payoff of casting a vote amongst millions of people that exist in a democracy is actually not that high, and more specifically, does not justify the costs. But for most people, it's much more utilitarian. It's much more straightforward. It's much more about what you can get out of the process, right? And that's influencing the outcome, and you're unlikely to do that. And so that's really where political scientists start with their understanding of why knowledge is so low. We don't assume it's because people are dumb. We assume it's because most people don't have good reason to learn about politics. Fox News tells them, or when MSNBC tells them, or when the Democratic Party tells them, you shouldn't think this way, you shouldn't like this candidate, you shouldn't vote this way on this issue. They don't have to go out and do a full amount of research. So they already know that Fox and MSNBC reflects their views. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I can see some of you really reacting against that right now. But that is the argument that's been advanced. And this is an argument that, and this is where you're really not going to like it if you don't like the first part, that this actually makes democracy work. Because if you go back to Downs, if you even go further back than that to Plato, right, the argument is that democracy really shouldn't work because the public doesn't know enough to self-govern, and they don't have any incentive to learn, right? What these scholars are arguing is, no, you don't have anything to worry about. They don't have to spend an hour each day reading the New York Times, right? All they need to do is make enough of an investment to identify a source that they trust, and then they can listen to what that source says. And in that way, people can vote as they would if they were fully informed.